There was only one law in the galaxy that belonged to humanity. It was not written on paper or carved into stone. It was carved into memory, etched into the bones of history and whispered in every corner of the stars. The law was simple. It had no debates, no exceptions, and no second chances. No one, no alien, no empire, no kingdom of the void, was allowed to spill human blood for their gain. That was the law of the stars. For centuries it stood, untouched. The other species of the galaxy mocked humans for many things. They mocked their fragility, their short lives, their endless arguments. But none of them mocked this law. Even the most arrogant rulers, those who conquered planets and bent galaxies to their will, stayed away from it. For they knew what it meant. They knew how much blood had been spilled to create that law. Yet in the cold silence of deep space, arrogance always grows. The empire of the Calreth had forgotten fear. They believed themselves to be untouchable. Their fleet stretched across hundreds of systems. Their soldiers marched on worlds where suns burned red and cold. They had weapons that shattered moons, armor that could endure fire from fleets. In their arrogance they began to whisper, and whispers became plans. The Calreth wanted human blood. They said it was for study, for strength, for the forging of a new warrior breed. But it was not science that drove them. It was pride. It was the belief that if they broke the law and stood tall, the humans would stay silent. On the colony of Vera, a small world at the edge of mapped space, their arrogance turned into action. The night sky of Vera was filled with stars and streaks of pale light. Families sat inside domes that protected them from the thin air. Children laughed and workers dreamed of a better tomorrow. They did not know the Calreth had come. The first ships arrived without warning. Black shadows slid across the sky, blotting out starlight. Engines roared like thunder. Soldiers marched through the dust. They did not speak. They did not ask. They only took. Screams echoed through the colony as the Calreth seized the people. Men and women were dragged into cages. Children cried for their parents, but the soldiers did not listen. The law of the stars had been broken. Human blood spilled onto alien steel floors, but the Calreth laughed. They laughed as they loaded their ships with captives. They laughed as they lifted from the ground, leaving burning ruins behind. They believed humanity would never know. They believed Earth had forgotten its law. They believed the silence of the stars was proof of weakness. They were wrong. News travels faster than light when it is soaked in blood. From colony to colony, from outpost to outpost, the whispers spread. The Calreth had broken the law. They had taken blood. And then the silence changed. In the void of space, human warships stirred. They did not rise in anger or in haste. They rose with the weight of history pressing against their steel hulls. Engines flared, lights came alive, and fleets began to gather. The admirals did not speak of mercy. The captains did not ask for peace. Their words were cold like iron in the dark. If they wanted blood, we will repay them in full. The stars themselves seemed to tremble as the fleets moved. One ship became 10. 10 became 100. The black void filled with human steel and human fire. Yet even as the fleets gathered, the Calreth laughed. They had heard of human fleets before. They had fought humans in minor wars. They believed this would be the same. A border clash, a warning shot, then peace, but they had forgotten the law. The narrator's voice cuts like a blade through silence. There is only one law of the stars, one law humanity gave to the galaxy. Break it and blood will follow you. On the edge of Calreth space, their patrol ships drifted lazily, unprepared. They laughed at rumors of humans gathering fleets. They mocked the silence of Earth. They mocked the weakness of mortals. And then they saw it. At first, it was only a shadow, slipping out of the void. A single ship, alone. The patrol captain laughed. One ship meant nothing, but when the shadow moved closer, the laughter faded. The human warship was vast. Its guns glowed like burning suns. Its armor reflected the fire of distant stars. Engines burned with silent fury, lighting the void in blue and white. The patrol captain whispered one word, but it was already too late. The law had awakened. The crime the Calreth believed they had won before the war had even begun. Their empire was vast, their ships uncountable, their arrogance boundless. They looked at humanity and saw a young race with fragile bones and short lifespans. They thought the law of the stars was only a tale told to frighten the weak. To them, it was nothing more than a story, a myth, a superstition. So they broke it. The Calreth scientists were the first to cross the line. In secret labs hidden in drifting stations, they began to take what was forbidden. The captives of Vera were the first victims. They were strapped to cold metal tables, their veins pierced by alien tools. Blood was drawn, measured, injected into Calreth soldiers who stood like statues while the experiments began. For the scientists, it was triumph. They whispered that the blood of humanity was a fountain of strength, that it carried resilience no other species possessed. A Calreth soldier who tasted it felt his limbs grow stronger, his sight sharper, his wounds slower to bleed. The Empire rejoiced. They believed they had stolen the secret of endurance itself, but in their celebration, they forgot the cries of the captives. Children sat in cages, watching their parents vanish into laboratories never to return. Men were left broken after endless drains of blood, their bodies pale, their hearts weak. The Calreth recorded everything, their data glowing across endless screens. To them, these humans were not people. They were fuel. Still, the laughter continued. In the great halls of the Calreth High Council, warlords raised their voices in triumph. Humanity will do nothing, they said. Their fleets are scattered. Their people are divided. They are a race of talkers, not warriors. The law of the stars was broken again and again. More colonies fell. On the edge of the Orion Arm, a convoy of human settlers was taken by surprise. Entire families vanished into the holds of Calreth cruisers. On a mining outpost near the Corethth Rift, engineers were dragged into the night by soldiers with burning eyes. The Calreth were not hiding anymore. They were proud, and still, humanity was silent. For the common people of Earth, silence was terror. Reports whispered through the networks. A mother in New Europa searched for her son, taken on a trade route and never returned. A father on Titan sent messages into the void, begging for news of his missing daughter. Ships carried rumors faster than light. The Calreth were drinking human blood. The galaxy watched. Other species turned their eyes away. They remembered the old law, but none dared speak. Some hoped it was not true. Some feared that if it was, humanity would rise again, and their vengeance would burn everything in its path. The Calreth mistook silence for weakness. They mistook fear for surrender. On the capital world of Corethth, the Calreth leader, Archon stood before his council. His voice echoed through the chamber, proud and loud. "We have broken their law," he declared. "We have taken their blood, and what has humanity done? Nothing. They are cowards. They are shadows. The galaxy belongs to us now." His generals struck the floor with their weapons in agreement. They believed the Archon's words. They believed the myth of humanity's wrath was nothing but smoke. But myths have roots. Far from Calreth space, in the cold black between stars, a message spread. It did not come from diplomats. It did not come from politicians. It came from steel and fire. Human fleets were on the move, silent, cold, relentless. The Calreth laughed when they first saw the reports. "One ship here, one ship there," their captains said. "Stray hunters. Patrols at best. They will not fight us." They dismissed the warnings, convinced of their own strength. They did not see the pattern. The humans were not gathering for a skirmish. They were gathering for judgment. On the colonies where blood had been spilled, the survivors whispered the same words into the void. "Remember the law. Remember what happens when it is broken." Their voices carried like a storm. Even those who had never seen Earth, who had never known its wars, could feel the weight of the past pressing down on them. The Calreth had not just broken a rule. They had lit a fire older than their empire, older than their arrogance, a fire that had been waiting in silence, patient and watchful, and the first spark was already moving. In the depths of uncharted space, a human battleship tore free of its dock. Its engines burned brighter than the stars around it. Its guns hummed with silent promise. On its hull, the insignia of humanity glowed like fire against steel. The Calreth had taken blood. Humanity was coming to take everything else. Humanity answers. The Calreth believed the silence of humanity was weakness. They mistook patience for fear and restraint for surrender. But humanity had not been silent. Humanity had been listening. Humanity had been preparing. Across the scattered colonies and stations, the message had already spread. Families who had lost children, miners who had lost brothers, soldiers who had lost comrades. They all repeated the same words. The law has been broken. The blood will be answered. On Earth, the great halls of command came alive with a weight not felt in generations. Admirals gathered in silence, their faces carved with stone. They did not argue, they did not debate. The law was not a question, it was a promise. The decision was already made before the first meeting began. Humanity would answer. One by one, the fleets rose. From the frozen shipyards of Europa, black cruisers ignited their engines. From the orbital docks above Mars, carriers launched with decks lined in steel. From the shadow stations hidden beyond Saturn's rings, long-range dreadnoughts stirred like beasts in hibernation. The void filled with power, and for the first time in centuries, the entire human fleet began to move with one purpose. The captains did not speak of mercy. Their orders were cold and clear. The Calreth will pay. Even in the silence of deep space, the tension could be felt. Workers on distant stations watched as one ship after another vanished into jump space, their trails burning across the stars. Traders saw convoys of warships pass, their hulls glowing with fury, and they whispered to one another, "The storm has come." The Calreth did not believe it. Their scouts reported human fleets massing, but the Council dismissed the warnings. "They will not fight us," the Archon declared. "They are too divided, too fragile. They cannot stand against us." His generals laughed with him, but the Calreth soldiers at the edges of their empire did not laugh. On the barren moon of Helion, a patrol saw it first, a human battleship drifting alone against the black. The Calreth captain laughed at the sight, mocking its size, mocking its silence. But when the ship fired, laughter died. In one strike, the Calreth patrol fleet was erased, burned away as though it had never existed. Reports spread like fire. One ship had destroyed many. But still, the Calreth did not believe. They told themselves it was chance, it was a mistake, it was a trick. Until it happened again, and again, and again. The humans did not send warnings. They did not send envoys. They did not declare war. They simply began to cut. Patrol by patrol, fleet by fleet, the Calreth Empire started to bleed. For every colony where humans had been taken, a Calreth garrison burned. For every lab where blood was stolen, a shipyard was erased. The humans struck with precision, cold and merciless. In the council chambers of the Calreth, fear began to whisper. Generals brought reports of lost fleets, but the Archon dismissed them as lies. He stood before his people and declared, "We are the greatest empire in the stars. Humanity cannot break us." But far from his throne, his fleets told a different story. Captains stared at the remains of their ships torn apart in seconds. Soldiers whispered in panic as rumors spread that human warships were invisible, untouchable, unstoppable. Some spoke of battles where not a single human word was spoken. Only the thunder of weapons and the silence of wreckage left behind. The galaxy watched. Other empires stayed silent. They remembered the old law. They remembered what had happened long ago, when another species tried to spill human blood. They remembered how that story ended. None dared to interfere. On the dark edges of Calreth space, a survivor of one destroyed patrol spoke in broken whispers. "They do not fight like us. They do not fight for land or for glory. They fight for something colder. They fight for law, and the law does not forgive." The Calreth had believed humanity's silence was weakness, but silence was never weakness. It was waiting. It was judgment. It was the breath drawn before the strike, and now the strike had come. One battle would be remembered above the rest. The siege of Corethth Gate. The Calreth had gathered a fleet of 300 ships, believing numbers would crush the human advance. They waited at the edge of their territory, confident that victory was certain. When the humans arrived, they sent only 50 ships. The Calreth laughed once more. But when the battle began, laughter vanished into screams. Human ships moved like shadows, striking with impossible precision. Entire wings of Calreth cruisers shattered in minutes. Carriers burned, their fighters cut down before they could launch. Dreadnoughts that had stood for centuries broke apart like glass under the fury of human guns. And in the silence that followed, the humans did not cheer, they did not boast. They simply moved on. The Calreth began to understand. This was not war as they knew it. It was not a contest of strength. It was not a struggle for power. It was punishment. It was law made real, and humanity had only just begun. The reckoning, the Calreth Empire had always thought itself untouchable. Their fleets stretched across half the stars they claimed. Their worlds burned with endless industry, and their soldiers marched as if they were carved from stone. But all of that power meant nothing now. For the first time in their history, they were afraid. Humanity had stopped waiting. The strikes grew bolder. Entire Calreth fleets were erased in hours. Outposts that had stood for centuries fell into silence overnight. The humans did not send messages of war, did not broadcast demands, did not claim new territories. They left behind nothing but wreckage and the silence of empty space. The Calreth tried to answer with strength. At the border of the Tereth expanse, they assembled their largest armada. 200 warships gathered beneath the shadow of a dying star, their engines burning, their weapons ready. They believed numbers would crush humanity. They believed arrogance could still protect them. But when the humans arrived, the sky itself changed. 50 ships broke from the void, smaller in number, but their presence bent the air like thunder. Their guns glowed with power, their engines flared with a silent rage. The Calreth commanders laughed when they saw them. 50 against 200. The battle would be short, they thought. They were wrong. The first shot cut through the black like lightning. One Calreth dreadnought split apart in silence, its hull torn open as fire spilled into the void. Then came another, and another. Human ships moved like shadows, each strike precise, each volley fatal. Calreth warships burned before they could even raise their shields. Their formations broke in panic, their proud lines shattered like glass. In the span of an hour, 200 ships became twisted metal. Only silence remained. The humans did not pause. They did not claim victory. They simply moved on. From that moment, the Calreth knew the truth. This was not war. This was judgment. The law of the stars had been broken, and the price was blood. On world after world, the reckoning continued. At Chorus Prime, a great military fortress, Calreth soldiers stood ready behind walls of steel. They swore no human force could breach them, yet the sky rained fire as orbital strikes cut through their defenses in seconds. When the smoke cleared, nothing remained but ash and silence. At the research stations hidden in the black, the humans struck with surgical precision. The labs where captives had been drained and broken were torn apart, their scientists silenced forever. The data they had gathered, the secrets they thought gave them strength, all erased. The very places where the law was first broken became graves. The Calreth begged for mercy. Messages reached across the stars pleading for peace. They offered prisoners back. They offered riches. They offered submission. But humanity did not answer with words. Humanity answered with silence, and the silence was heavier than any weapon. The galaxy watched in dread. Other empires held their breath, remembering the old warning. They had once thought the law of the stars was only a myth, a story told to frighten arrogant rulers. Now they saw it alive again, painted in fire and wreckage. None dared interfere. None dared break the law. Archon Valeth, the proud ruler of the Calreth, sat in his great chamber as the walls of his empire fell around him. Reports poured in. Fleets destroyed, colonies gone dark, soldiers surrendering without a fight. His generals whispered that the end was near, but Valeth refused to accept it. His voice thundered across the chamber. "They are only men," he roared. "They cannot break us." But his generals no longer believed him. Even as he shouted, more reports arrived. The humans were inside Calreth space, moving faster than any defense could hold. One by one, his fleets crumbled. One by one, his worlds burned. For every human life taken, 10 Calreth lives fell. For every drop of blood spilled, entire oceans of fire rained down. The reckoning was not rage. It was not chaos. It was cold, deliberate, inevitable. Humanity did not fight with hate. They fought with law, and law does not bend. Law does not forgive. Law does not forget. The Calreth had thought themselves above consequence. But in the void of space, consequence had come, and it wore the face of humanity. Blood paid in full, the Calreth Empire had reached its breaking point. Worlds that once glowed with their banners now burned with silence. Fleets that once stretched across the stars were nothing but drifting wreckage. The laughter that had once filled their halls was gone, replaced by whispers of fear. The reckoning had come, and there was no escape. On the capital world of Corethth, Archon Valeth still clung to his throne. His eyes were wild. His voice cracked with fury as he shouted at his generals. "We are not beaten," he cried. "We are the strongest empire in the galaxy." But his words were empty. Reports flooded in, each one worse than the last. A garrison erased in hours, a fleet reduced to dust. colonies vanishing under fire that rained from the sky. The humans did not bargain, they did not negotiate, they did not stop. They had come for blood, and blood was all they would take. The final blow began without warning. Above Corethth, the sky darkened. Thousands looked up from the streets and saw the shadow of death descending. Human warships filled the heavens, blotting out the light of their sun. Engines roared like storms. Guns glowed with silent fire. For a moment, time froze. The people of Corethth felt the weight of history pressing down on them. They remembered the stories they had mocked, the law they had ignored, and now they saw the price written in the sky. The first strike fell like lightning. Shields shattered, towers crumbled, fire spread across the surface of the capital. The Calreth military rose to fight, but their weapons were nothing against the precision of the human fleet. Every defense was destroyed before it could even take aim. In the council chamber, silence fell. The generals lowered their heads. Even Valeth could no longer deny the truth. His empire was gone. His pride was ash. He whispered one final word, and it was not to his soldiers, not to his council, but to the stars themselves. Forgive us. But the stars offered no forgiveness. Humanity did not answer with words. The bombardment rained down until Corethth was broken. The great spires collapsed into rubble, the proud banners torn into dust. When the smoke cleared, the capital of the Calreth Empire was nothing but ruins beneath a sky filled with human steel. And then came the silence. The humans did not cheer. They did not speak. Their fleets hung above the world like judges who had passed their sentence. One by one, their ships turned, leaving behind only ash. They did not claim Corethth. They did not take its riches. They did not need to. The law had been carried out. The blood had been paid. The galaxy trembled. Every empire, every kingdom, every wandering fleet had seen what happened. They had seen what it meant to break humanity's law. No ruler dared question it now. No species dared test its edge. The silence of the stars was heavy, but it was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of respect. On Earth, the admirals stood in their halls of command. They gave no speeches. They offered no parades. They simply closed their books, knowing the law was upheld. The faces of the lost, the names of the taken, would not return, but their blood had been avenged. In the colonies that had suffered, survivors whispered their gratitude. They spoke of fleets that had moved like shadows, of judgment that had fallen like fire. They knew their dead had not been forgotten, and across the void in the ruins of the Calreth Empire silence reigned. No one sang of their glory. No one remembered their pride. They were a lesson now carved into the bones of history, a warning to all who listened. The narrator's voice lingers cold and unyielding. There is only one law of the stars. Humanity made it long ago. Break it, and the blood will be repaid. The story of the Calreth ended in fire, but the law remained. Stronger than any fleet, older than any empire, it hung in the void like a shadow over every world. For as long as the stars burned, no one would forget.